Verses 9 to 18. Cornelius had received positive orders from heaven to send for Peter, whom otherwise he had not heard of, or at least not heeded, but here is another difficulty that lies in the way of bringing them together. The question is whether Peter will come to Cornelius when he is sent for, not as if he thought it below him to come at a beck, or as if he were afraid to preach his doctrine to a polite man as Cornelius was, but it sticks at a point of conscience. Cornelius is a very worthy man, and has many good qualities, but he is a Gentile, he is not circumcised, and, because God in his law had forbidden his people to associate with idolatrous nations, they would not keep company with any but those of their own religion, though they were ever so deserving, and they carried the matter so far that they made even the involuntary touch of a Gentile to contract a ceremonial pollution. JN 18:28. Peter had not got over this stingy bigoted notion of his countrymen, and therefore will be shy of coming to Cornelius. Now, to remove this difficulty, he has a vision here, to prepare him to receive the message sent him by Cornelius, as Ananias had to prepare him to go to Paul. The scriptures of the Old Testament had spoken plainly of the bringing in of the Gentiles into the church. Christ had given plain intimations of it when he ordered them to teach all nations, and yet even Peter himself, who knew so much of his master's mind, could not understand it, till it was here revealed by vision, that the Gentiles should be fellow heirs. F3:6. Now here observe the circumstances of this vision. 1. It was when the messengers sent from Cornelius were now nigh the city. v9. Peter knew nothing of their approach, and they knew nothing of his praying, but he that knew both him and them was preparing things for the interview, and facilitating the end of their negotiation. To all God's purposes there is a time, a proper time, and he is pleased often to bring things to the minds of his ministers, which they had not thought of, just then when they have occasion to use them. 2. It was when Peter went up upon the housetop to pray, about noon. 1. Peter was much in prayer, much in secret prayer, though he had a great deal of public work upon his hands. 2. He prayed about the 6th hour, according to David's example, who, not only morning and evening, but at noon, addressed himself to God by prayer. PS 55:17. From morning to night we should think to be too long to be without meat, yet who thinks it is too long to be without prayer? 3. He prayed upon the housetop, thither he retired for privacy, where he could neither hear nor be heard, and so might avoid both distraction and ostentation. There, upon the roof of the house, he had a full view of the heavens, which might assist his pious adoration of the God he prayed to, and there he had also a full view of the city and country, which might assist his pious compassion of the people he prayed for. 4. He had this vision immediately after he had prayed, as an answer to his prayer for the spreading of the gospel, and because the assent of the heart to God in prayer is an excellent preparative to receive the discoveries of the divine grace and favor. 3. It was when he became very hungry, and was waiting for his dinner. v10. Probably he had not that day eaten before, though doubtless he had prayed before, and now he would have eaten, the legisasthai he would have tasted, which intimates his great moderation and temperance in eating. When he was very hungry, yet he would be content with a little, with the taste, and would not fly upon the spoil. Now this hunger was a proper inlet to the vision about meats, as Christ's hunger in the wilderness was to Satan's temptation to turn stones into bread. 2. The vision itself, which was not so plain as that to Cornelius, but more figurative and enigmatical, to make the deeper impression. 1. He fell into a trance or ecstasy, not of terror, but of contemplation, with which he was so entirely swallowed up as not only not to be regardful, but not to be sensible, of external things. He quite lost himself to this world, and so had his mind entirely free for converse with divine things, as Adam in innocency, when the deep sleep fell upon him. The more clear we get of the world, the more near we get to heaven. Whether Peter was now in the body or out of the body he could not himself tell, much less can we. 2 Co 12:2, 3. See General 15:12, Acts 22:17. 2. He saw heaven opened, that he might be sure that his authority to go to Cornelius was indeed from heaven, that it was a divine light which altered his sentiments, and a divine power which gave him his commission. The opening of the heavens signified the opening of a mystery that had been hid, Rom 16:25. 3. He saw a great sheet full of all manner of living creatures, which descended from heaven, and was let down to him to the earth, that is, to the roof of the house where he now was. Here were not only beasts of the earth, but fowls of the air, which might have flown away, laid at his feet, and not only tame beasts, but wild. Here were no fishes of the sea, because there were none of them in particular unclean, but whatever had fins and scales was allowed to be eaten. Some make this sheet, thus filled, to represent the Church of Christ. It comes down from heaven opened, not only to send it down, Revelation 21:2, but to receive souls sent up from it. It is knit at the four corners, to receive those from all parts of the world that are willing to be added to it, and to retain and keep those safe that are taken into it, that they may not fall out, and in this we find some of all countries, nations, and languages, without any distinction of Greek or Jew, or any disadvantage put upon barbarian or Scythian, Colonel 3:11. The net of the gospel encloses all, both bad and good, those that before were clean and unclean. Or it may be applied to the bounty of the divine providence, which, antecedently to the prohibitions of the ceremonial law, had given to man a liberty to use all the creatures, to which by the cancelling of that law we are now restored. By this vision we are taught to see all the benefit and service we have from the inferior creatures coming down to us from heaven. It is the gift of God who made them fit for us, and then gave to man a right to them, and dominion over them. Lord, what is man that he should be thus magnified? PS 8:4-8. How should it double our comfort in the creatures, and our obligations to serve God in the use of them, to see them thus let down to us out of heaven? 4. He was ordered by a voice from heaven to make use of this plenty and variety which God had sent him. V13 Rise, Peter, kill and eat, without putting any difference between clean and unclean, take which thou hast most mind to. The distinction of meats which the law made was intended to put a difference between Jew and Gentile, that it might be difficult to them to dine and sup with a Gentile, because they would have that set before them which they were not allowed to eat, and now the taking off of that prohibition was a plain allowance to converse with the Gentiles, and to be free and familiar with them. Now they might fare as they fared, and therefore might eat with them, and be fellow commoners with them. 5. He stuck to his principles, and would by no means hearken to the motion, though he was hungry. V14 Not so, Lord. Though hunger will break through stone walls, God's laws should be to us a stronger fence than stone walls, and not so easily broken through. And he will adhere to God's laws, though he has a countermand by a voice from heaven, not knowing at first but that kill, and eat, was a command of trial whether he would adhere to the more sure word, the written law, and if so his answer had been very good, not so, Lord. Temptations to eat forbidden fruit must not be parleyed with, but peremptorily rejected. We must startle at the thought of it, not so, Lord. The reason he gives is, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean, hitherto I have kept my integrity in this matter, and will still keep it. If God, by his grace, has preserved us from gross sin unto this day, we should use this as an argument with ourselves to abstain from all appearance of evil. So strict were the pious Jews in this matter, that the 7 brethren, those glorious martyrs under Antiochus, choose rather to be tortured to death in the most cruel manner that ever was than to eat swine's flesh, because it was forbidden by the law. No wonder then that Peter says it with so much pleasure, that his conscience could witness for him that he had never gratified his appetite with any forbidden food. 6. God, by a second voice from heaven, proclaimed the repeal of the law in this case. V15 What God hath cleansed, that call thou not common. He that made the law might alter it when he pleased, and reduce the matter to its first state. God had, for reasons suited to the Old Testament dispensation, restrained the Jews from eating such and such meats, to which, while that dispensation lasted, they were obliged in conscience to submit, but he has now, for reasons suited to the New Testament dispensation, taken off that restraint, and set the matter at large, has cleansed that which was before polluted to us, and we ought to make use of, and stand fast in, the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free, and not call that common or unclean which God has now declared clean. Note, we ought to welcome it as a great mercy that by the gospel of Christ we are freed from the distinction of meats, which was made by the law of Moses, and that now every creature of God is good, and nothing to be refused, not so much because hereby we gain the use of swine's flesh, hares, rabbits, and other pleasant and wholesome food for our bodies, but chiefly because conscience is hereby freed from a yoke in things of this nature, that we might serve God without fear. Though the gospel has made duties which were not so by the law of nature, yet it has not, like the law of Moses, made sins that were not so. Those who command to abstain from some kinds of meat at some times of the year, and place religion in it, call that common which God hath cleansed, and in that error, more than in any truth, are the successors of Peter. 7. This was done thrice, v. 16. The sheet was drawn up a little way, and let down again the second time, and so the third time, with the same call to him, to kill, and eat, and the same reason, that what God hath cleansed we must not call common, but whether Peter's refusal was repeated the second and third time is not certain. Surely it was not, when his objection had the first time received such a satisfactory answer. The trebling of Peter's vision, like the doubling of Pharaoh's dream, was to show that the thing was certain, and engage him to take so much the more notice of it. The instructions given us in the things of God, whether by the ear in the preaching of the word, or by the eye in sacraments, need to be often repeated. Precept must be upon precept, and line upon line. But at last the vessel was received up into heaven. Those who make this vessel to represent the Church, including both Jews and Gentiles, as this did both clean and unclean creatures, make this very aptly to signify the admission of the believing Gentiles into the Church, and into heaven too, into the Jerusalem above. Christ has opened the kingdom of heaven to all believers, and there we shall find, besides those that are sealed out of all the tribes of Israel, an innumerable company out of every nation, Revelation 7:9, but they are such as God has cleansed. 3. The providence which very opportunely explained this vision, and gave Peter to understand the intention of it, v. 17:18. 1. What Christ did, Peter knew not just then. Jn 13:7. He doubted within himself what this vision which he had seen should mean. He had no reason to doubt the truth of it, that it was a heavenly vision. All his doubt was concerning the meaning of it. Note, Christ reveals himself to his people by degrees, and not all at once, and leaves them to doubt a while, to ruminate upon a thing, and debate it to and fro in their own minds, before he clears it up to them. 2. Yet he was made to know presently, for the men who were sent from Cornelius were just now come to the house, and were at the gate inquiring whether Peter lodged there, and by their errand it will appear what was the meaning of this vision. Note, God knows what services are before us, and therefore how to prepare us, and we then better know the meaning of what he has taught us when we find what occasion we have to make use of it.